It's 1 o'clock, and we're reconvening to talk about the county development ordinance, and I'd like to call the meeting to order. Would you please call the roll?
Sure. Margaret Clements.
Here.
Tron Enright Randolph.
Here, and I just wanted to state, and I communicated it and also mentioned at our previous meeting that I had planned to take the day off, but I wanted to make sure that we were able to establish a quorum. With that said, I will be leaving at 3 o'clock. There's a chance another member will be joining us, and you'll still have a quorum and be able to conduct business as intended until 3:45 today. Here.
Thank you. Scott Ferris.
Here.
Jeff Morris.
Here.
Cheryl Munson. Edward Ullman. Dee Owens.
Here.
Jerry Pittsford. Julie Thomas.
Here.
And then we have 2 members additional from the Board of Commissioners, Penny Githens.
Here.
And is Lee Jones online? Okay.
I don't think so. Oh,
Okay.
yeah, she is.
Here.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. So we do have 5 members in person for a Plan Commission quorum.
Okay, great. And do you have any announcements or any guidance or directives that you'd like to make before we begin on page 53?
Sure, yes. So I was just going to mention we are starting at towards the bottom of page 53. We're meeting today from 1 to 3:45. At about 3:40, I may ask the group, depending on where we are, whether you want to proceed with more administrative meetings or how else you would like to finish out the content. We have about 3 more Excel spreadsheet pages to get through. And then we do have 2 items tabled that we've provided printouts for and an addendum to go back over the zoning maps for 2 areas.
Okay, great.
All right, so I'll go ahead and share my screen and we'll pick up where we left off. Okay, so the next item is actually an item brought to you by staff. This is a discussion about whether you would like to see a use added for accessory outdoor vehicle storage. We have in the packet you'll see on the next page, text 15 is an idea of what this might include in terms of a definition and standards. We do receive a lot of complaints in our office about vehicle storage on private properties, and we're wondering if the Plan Commission would like to see a standard set forth on number of vehicles, the types of vehicles, and how they should be stored. We've put forward a proposal for some standards such as boats, passenger vehicles, and RVs may be stored for over 48 hours, if not in excess of 6 on one total legal lot of record, must be for personal use, and each must be located on an improved surface. We did define that as gravel or asphalt or concrete. And then we further discussed that RVs may not be hooked to water, electric, and or private sewage disposal. There are some exceptions noted. And then additionally, we had a comment in here about 1 semi-truck or 1 school bus may be parked on the property if utilized for business purposes by the owner, but it would count towards the 6 total. So it's a rough draft of an idea that we put in here because we do receive a lot of complaints, and to just make it a little bit clearer, both for planning, to communicate to the public and our legal department if it gets to that point. It's something that we could see utilizing maybe in more of the rural districts. So the question is, would you like to see staff work on this and put it into the use table, or is this something you would like to see tabled for another day, or is this something you do not want to utilize and we would just refer back to our, we have a junkyard definition which just discusses, vehicles that are stored on the property and that may not be usable and, not on improved services, and that would be what we would utilize for enforcement purposes.
Mr. Enright Randolph?
Sorry, I thought Dee's hand was up. I guess my question is, you kind of mentioned what's kind of the impetus of this. Do we get a lot of phone calls and complaints? And if you want to address that'd be fine, but I really kind of have more of a comment than a question. So I'll just kind of continue. I think it comes down to enforcement, right? And being able to drive around and see how, when it is an excess of 6, and then put the clock on, and then come out in 48 hours to see. So unfortunately, the way I feel like this is potentially able to be enforced is just by someone that feels like it's an annoyance and calls and complains and puts a mechanism versus us actually being able to go out there, canvass the county, and making sure no one's doing this. And I kind of have concerns when ordinances kind of lack that ability to kind of be enforced countywide very fairly, and this kind of creates an opportunity just for a neighbor that is annoyed by it to call in and then have that enforcement complaint. Would you think that summarization of the way that this would be regulated is somewhat accurate, where
I think that it could also be used as a communication tool. We do get people asking, how can I store my RV on my property? How many vehicles do I have to provide parking spaces for, et cetera. So I think that during the building permit phase, which is when most people interact with us, we could communicate this standard and it would be clear for people, and maybe avoid future enforcement. On the other hand, though, we are complaint-based, so if there is an enforcement issue, this gives us clear guidance. Okay, it's less than 6 or it's more than 6. It just helps to have a number.
Yeah, I get that. And just to conclude my thought and comment is, this probably doesn't seem that bad of a thing to put in place. Just that's a higher concern of mine. And also, if we can't kind of go out there and enforce things, some person's going to see maybe more vehicles stored and think it's okay. And yeah, we can point to that, but it kind of creates a mixed messaging because, some person might do it, no one finds an issue with it, think that they're allowed to too, because, everyone's not going to call planning to see what they can do in their driveway. So those are my kind of thoughts around this, that if the enforcement can't be kind of more broadly and fair versus complaint driven only, I'm a little reluctant to want to support ordinances such as that.
So I'd just like to make a point of order. Tech Services, during our last meeting, you had an ascending clock when members of the committee were speaking, and I wonder if you could please reinstate that. And then also, Ms. Owens, if you would, your hand is raised, I'd like to recognize you.
Thank you very much. I think that we don't need to waste the ink on this myself. It's, for example, an RV can be hooked to water, electric, or private sewage not to exceed 30 days a year. I understand the idea is to keep people from living in RVs, but that's not enough for people that are campers. And what are they supposed to do? Go out and yank their sewage out so that they're not in violation? I mean, it's just, I think it sets up a lot of nightmare scenarios. As far as the number of vehicles on property, some people have like 2 school bus drivers, and then they have 2 vehicles, and then they have maybe some farm stuff, or maybe a camper, and then they got a couple kids that live with them with pickup trucks, then they're over. I just think I don't think it's necessary to set it up. If there's an issue, then we can try and deal with the issue, I should say you can try and deal with the issue, but I don't think it's necessary.
Director Jelen, is there a way that you could insert a mechanism into your future calendar to revisit this if you have an X number of complaints? And also I can see that there might be a lot of variability across the county and across the different zones. What might be kind of noisome in a 0.25 acre parcel may not be bothersome at all in a 5-acre parcel. Right. So if you would, I think this is a little bit generic, and if we could revisit it with more detail along with a complaint-based analysis at a future point. How many people are in agreement of that? Okay, and Lee Jones, D, okay, thank you. Let's move on to the next item. I'll let you review this, Jackie.
Sure. There was a request to allow outdoor storage for light industrial, heavy industrial, and mineral extraction zones for utility construction related companies in order to inventory in an orderly fashion standard business practices by the industry. So basically, some uses within those districts state that there shall be no outdoor storage. So what we do have in another retail zoning district that we could make in the industrial zoning land use category is we could have an outdoor storage as accessory use that someone could apply for in addition to their primary use, and that way it could be tacked on to an individual use rather than addressed in the overall zoning. So depending on the use, they could have accessory outdoor storage, or depending on the screening, they could have accessory outdoor storage. So the question before you is, do you want to have us add an outdoor accessory storage use in the land use table specific for the light industrial, heavy industrial, mineral extraction zones?
Commissioner Thomas?
I would like to make a suggestion that we allow outdoor storage in the mineral extraction zone, but not the others.
I would agree with that. How many people, is there further discussion? Agreement? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and I
have her hand up.
Okay.
And to clarify, that would be to not allow for outdoor storage for uses that otherwise are drafted as saying no outdoor storage in those zones. Okay, all right.
Just mineral extraction, because that's clearly a need. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, we're on to page 55.
Yes.
That feels good.
Okay, so this was a request by somebody in the public regarding to reduce uses in the CVR district. We had another comment regarding this as well, but this comment is specific to the types of uses that they would like to see reduced in the CVR district. So the question is, would you like to reduce out of the CVR district aquaculture, institutional or community garden, garden center, nursery and or greenhouse on a commercial scale, winery, veterinary service, large animal or small animal, artificial pond or lake, cemetery or mausoleum, crematory and or funeral home, clean fill, container collection facilities, and then I won't read the rest, but you see it on the screen. So there, if we could take these one by one, or if somebody has a motion on if they would like to reduce these.
Let the record reflect that Mr. Pittsford has arrived. Thank you, Mr. Pittsford, for coming.
Thank you.
Yes. There are a few uses that are of concern to me. I don't think it's necessary to take them one by one. But I guess container or transfer facilities for waste transfer facilities, I don't think should be permitted in residential areas or in conservation residential areas at all.
Collection container facilities?
Yes.
Okay.
I don't think dry cleaning belongs in a CVR district. I don't know, the print is so small. Chemical pollution. We have greenhouses currently in the residential areas that are south, and funeral homes we have.
And I think just to further, because I'm looking at the two-pager for the CVR district, and I understand that this comment in its original form may have been geared just generally towards not just the CVR, which makes up most of the eco area, but all of the eco area. I'll note for the record, we do not have a zone, a land use table that is by overlay area. So we could add into the eco area something that says use limitations. because, for instance, dry cleaning and laundry is not in the CVR district. So I think when we rewrote this, these are generally speaking concerns about uses in the eco, which CVR happens to be most of the eco. So if you want to outline uses that you find problematic, not just in CVR, but in any part of the watershed, we can address it in another way to say there's a use limitation from the eco overlay perspective. But there may be an LB zone within the eco area.
Right, Jackie, would that also apply to PUDs, do you think? Mostly the point?
Ooh. I don't believe so, if it would, unless they did an amendment in the point after the date of the effective date of the CDO. I don't think they would be, I think they would be pre-existing.
Could you direct me to the page on which the use table you're describing?
Sure, I'll pull it over on the screen, actually. So do you want the land use table for all of the zones, or do you want it just for CVR?
I'd like to see it, I guess, for all.
Okay.
I'm on page 56, but it doesn't seem to,
I'm pulling up the
Yeah.
latest
Okay.
CDO document. So for instance, I will go to, let's start with maybe dry cleaning. So dry cleaning and laundry is only permitted in the LB, GB, and airport district. So I will tell you that there may be a few LB zones in the eco, and maybe very few general business zones in the eco.
I don't think it belongs where there isn't sewer hookup. You know, I don't think it belongs on a septic or anything like that, so I would eliminate that use.
Well, then why not make a condition sewer?
Yeah, that's what my question was, is in line with that. Are some of these uses conditional or permitted with standards, and like maybe some of the conditionals is it needs sewer, so just by the restraint that the property has itself, some of these uses can't be achieved? And then mine, what other, kind of to follow up on that, I guess, the container collection facility, is that like a recycling center? Like,
Drop off.
yeah, so if it's done appropriately, I think it could mitigate certain concerns of it, you know, impacting the eco overlay in an environmental way, but also it creates, I guess, accessibility for folks that do want to recycle that don't maybe have the ability and have to drive it in. So I guess those things are kind of entering my mind of thinking if we get rid of those, then are we going to be able to offer a recycling center in the eco that could then allow folks to recycle their trash, and that could help, you know, reduce, you know, pollutants out in that area. So it's pretty nuanced here, I understand. I just wanted to share those thoughts.
I agree with you because we currently have very valuable recycling centers, but the problem is in our concatenating the categories, it seems that the waste transfer stations could include more hazardous materials without our really having accounted for it in the use tables.
So the collection container facilities would be limited to those drop-off centers, as Tron was mentioning.
Okay.
The actual land, the sites that are out in the county that have waste transfer stations.
Yes.
That would be under solid waste processing, which is
Okay.
different use.
Okay, okay.
So,
Okay.
and I don't want to hinder
Right.
recycling and trash collection
I don't
by the
either.
county.
I don't either, but maybe dry cleaning. I don't see anywhere where it says that it is dependent upon sewer hookup.
It's not, and I could add that really easily.
It would make me feel better about it,
Yeah,
no matter
yeah,
where it is.
yeah.
That'd be great.
Or just like, as we were saying, looking at the eco overlay, maybe look to make a lot of those things conditioned to having sewer and stuff, so we do have a good way to dispose of that. I'm just kind of another broader thought on there. I really would love for us not to have to put in septics, even though a lot of people have different opinions on septics, but my personal one is if we could hook up to sewer, I think that would be more appropriate for these type of use, especially in areas that have environmental sensitivity.
Or I just think it should be on sewer no matter where it is, if it's a dry cleaning and laundry, because that's a lot of water and a lot
Or
of
car
chemicals.
wash,
Yeah.
or car wash.
Car wash, car wash, yep,
Yeah.
agreed.
Okay. Is there, I want to know about clean fill. We had discussions of that clean fill issue on the Plan Commission, and the Plan Commission or the Board of Zoning Appeals, I don't remember which, denied the request to put clean fill right there off of the highway. And I don't know where this clean fill operation would be allowed. Is it,
So the clean fill definition and use is new.
yes,
So it is something that if you wanted to review it in the use table, which I'll pull up, it would only be conditional in the AGR and in the mineral extraction zones, which means it would go to the Board of Zoning Appeals. And the standards that are listed that would have to be met are listed here on the screen, 1 through 4.
okay, do others have any comments or statements about, or concerns about these uses? No?
I think giving planning the ability to maybe look at it and find things that should be more conditional, and then maybe come back to us with kind of a refined list of how we can address kind of, I think you get the underlining takeaway of this discussion, and there's probably a few things that are more appropriate to be conditional than permitted, and I think if we wanted to give them that direction, that could be very helpful, because a lot of this has a lot of nuances.
Okay,
There are some parcels that would have access to sewer that are within the eco, just to make that clear. But for now, I'm hearing dry cleaning and car wash, make sure that it's permitted with standards if it is permitted, and that the standard would be it must be connected to sewer.
okay,
Is that the
yes.
motion?
And also to reevaluate the uses to make sure that you're adequately accounting for the concerns of environmental, harm without sewer broadly available in the county.
Do we want to show of hands?
Yeah, let's have a show of hands for that. It's a reconsideration after a little more detail.
Okay.
Thank
Is
you.
it two-part, is it change right now the standards for dry cleaning to add it must be on sewer, car wash must be on sewer, and then also reevaluate uses that could go in the eco?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. And then, again, page 55, there's a collection container system, and there was a concern that they may be permitted in the rural residential areas of the county, and there's a standard that is within 300 feet of a residence.
That seems close, to have those in the, close to the residential areas. 100 feet.
Yeah, I guess I'm just not,
I think at least the Bethel Road collection site is within 300 feet of a residence.
I live 2 doors down from it. It's a little loud in the morning sometimes. That's
So the use would be
me.
conditional for moving forward, it would be conditional. So any site that's within 300 feet or whatever standard was passed would be pre-existing non-conforming,
I see.
but any new site would have to meet whatever standard you would be asking for. If they
Okay.
wanted to expand, they'd have to get a variance.
Okay, and I just want to make sure that we're not talking about those transfer facilities that work enclosed and can we're not talking about that type yet, are we?
That's correct, and I
Okay.
can search the definition here so that we're all on the same page as well.
I'm sorry to take a little extra time on this, but this is the nuts and bolts of really, what could be noxious to people. So,
Oh,
My only concern about maybe increasing it is the practical difficulty of finding a space to actually build one maybe if we wanted any more thoughts from our assistant plan director of like, do you feel like 300 feet relatively addresses a lot of concerns as far as sound and things, and don't feel like you're obligated to
I think,
respond?
if anything, there should be, and I know like drop-off time starts at 7 a.m., but those, the trucks that that come drop off the bins, they start pretty darn early at like 5:30 sometimes in the morning. And that's probably the main, I've never smelled it. When people are just dropping off their recycling, I can hear the tinkling of glass, but I think that's a good sound. So like, otherwise, I've not had any issues living so close to one of those other than morning time beeps. It's the beeping.
Thank you for sharing.
Yeah.
This is the definition for collection container facility. And then once you have a chance to look at that, I will go down to the other definition for solid waste.
So by saying non-commercial, non-industrial, non-institutional means that it's from people, from residents, yes.
We did have to meet with the director of the Waste Reduction District to go over these uses. Here for a second, so you have to watch it scroll. And I think this is the use, Margaret, that you were having concerns about. So solid waste and/or recycling processing facility means a facility at which at least one of the following uses is located: a material recovery facility, which would be that indoor separation of materials, and possibly transfer station, which would be the baling or transfer and processing of materials. Composting was also under here, and solid waste hauler and equipment storage. So those two uses have been still
But
separated.
this is still solid waste from individuals, or could
No.
this be industrial then?
This would encompass like pickup from residential, like a commercial company coming to your residence and picking up
Yes.
the trash, where they were storing those haulers and where they are putting that material would be under this use.
But not from an industry. They would not be picking up the waste from an industry. It would just be from personal residents.
So this would cover both commercial, industrial, this would cover all waste collection and transfer. So, and do you want me to show you where it's allowed in the use table, this use?
Back, yes,
Okay.
would be so kind.
Okay.
Mr. Pittsford?
Yeah, I want to be clear on something too, because it says a facility for the storage of those roll-off bins. That means that they're empty when they're on site. So the operator of a roll-off company cannot bring roll-off bins into the property that have waste of any kind. Correct?
That's our understanding. I believe there's actually additional state code provisions that prevent it from either staying in a hauling truck or in a waste bin for so many hours. So they do have a requirement otherwise to,
Right, and
properly dispose
I
of
just
that.
wanted to be clear on that, because that's what I was reading, which means that, you know, if a facility's there as defined under solid waste and/or recycling processing facility, those roll-off bins do not come in with materials to be processed on those haulers.
Right.
But they may be on recycling facilities that are operated by companies that are recyclers, not roll-off companies, right? Like the Monroe County Solid Waste recycle stations, their bins may be there with stuff in them.
that's the collection container facilities.
Right,
And
right.
they're exempt,
And they're
yes.
defined differently
Right.
in this. That's what I wanted to be clear
see.
about. So
Yes.
that we know that in those areas where they are roll-off bin companies, they're only storing empty bins in that, under that use.
Right, so the collection container facility is allowed in more zones. It's conditionally allowed in some of the residential and rural residential zones, and then permitted with standards in the institutional, light industrial, and airport. And then when you go down to the solid waste and/or recycling processing, it's only conditional, and it's in the institutional, general business, light industrial, heavy industrial, mineral extraction, and airport.
So, so I think that people would like to move from this topic and go ahead and either approve it or make recommendations that it not be in a residential area.
I think the way planning has proposed, it's fine,
Pardon me?
and I said I would defer to the way that planning has it and just kind of move forward from the comment.
Mr. Pittsford had a comment.
Yeah, I don't see it appropriate for general business, but that may be just my take on it.
Yeah,
It could be a skunk at the garden party.
yeah. I have concerns with both light industrial and general business, because both of those can be, you don't want this near a residential area. So that's why it should be ME or heavy industrial, which is where it's at now. I mean,
Okay.
So for the solid waste or for the collection container facilities?
not the collection container, just the
Oh.
solid waste, the
Oh, okay.
processing, because that is loud and stinky.
Okay, so.
I agree with that. Sorry, I've been confused. Things got lumped together, so I didn't clearly understand which ones we were talking about. So, with-
Yes, if Jackie would kind of clarify the question so we could vote on those two issues.
Sure. So the question before you is only in regard to the collection container system definition and use. And the request is whether they should be even conditional in the rural residential areas, and if the standard of 300 feet is adequate.
I guess my comment is I support the way that staff has drafted it, presented it, and this change is not needed.
I think 300 feet is too close in a residential area. I don't, they currently exist in residential areas, but before any more are added, I think that it should have review.
So would you like us to change that standard from 300 feet to a different?
I would.
Okay.
I don't know if my colleagues agree.
I just don't know the practical difficulties we're going to create as far as proximity to residential, what type of size lot now they have to acquire. I feel like planning put thought into this, and the main goal is to allow recycling. And I think a lot of these are actually neighborhood-driven goals. And again, I'm sorry, I just defer to the way that staff has presented it, or planning has presented it.
So,
I think at this point I can try and call a vote. So first would be, who would like to see the collection container facilities removed from the rural residential district, therefore requiring a change to the CDO as presented? And then who would like it to stay how it's drafted currently in the CDO with it conditional in the rural residential?
And then if I would say, if you would be willing to look at the number of feet again and just come back to us at a
Okay.
later point, if that would be helpful.
Okay, so tabling
Kind of
the,
review.
no,
review.
it's approved, but as you wrote it,
Okay.
but the Commissioner Thomas asked for a special request to analyze that distance a little bit better and come back to us with an additional change.
If I might,
Yes, Mr. Pittsford?
I think the Monroe County Solid Waste District, the Go Green District, or whatever name they use these days, actually should be asked to conduct that information gathering and not planning staff. It is their facility. They should be sensitive to their neighbors. So I think my idea would be to request them to do a study if that the way they're operating now is sufficiently distant from residential.
I can work with them on that.
Okay. Yeah, I think they should want to know.
But most of them are not near residents. I think that Ms. Behrman is an exception in terms of her proximity to the Bethel Lane facility. Most of them are not operating close to residential areas, so.
Are you saying Ms. Behrman chooses to live near garbage?
It's recycling.
Oh, I'm sorry. No, there's also trash there too.
So, yeah, so I think that that's an exception, and it should be an exception, is my point. Yeah.
So we will table the discussion for further research about the 300-foot standard.
Yes.
And then I've made a note about the solid waste use should only be in the mineral extraction heavy industrial and remove that use away from the light industrial and general business districts. Do you want to make a motion on that?
Move
as
on
well?
that.
Okay. I don't know if Dee has her hand raised.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, I did support that.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
I was making a note, sorry.
I couldn't tell if Lee, or if,
Dee did raise her hand.
okay, thanks.
Okay, so the next item is a request to remove kennel and kennel breeding operations from any of the rural areas for concern of noise and concern of the standards stating the hours are between 8 a.m. and 8 p.m. So the question is, would the Plan Commission like to review kennel standards or reduce the zones where it is permitted? I can pull up kennels as well.
I would not. I think rural areas are ideal for kennels.
They're conditional.
They're
They are
conditional.
conditional, which means that neighbors will be contacted
Right.
before such an operation begins, which is the key, I think. Because it does depend on the size of the property and your neighbor's property and all of that. So I'm fine with leaving it as it is.
You know,
Okay.
Your motion on that? All right.
My hands, Jerry.
Thank you.
Dee's was up also.
Okay, and then the next comment is in regard to self-storage. There was a comment about that self-storage prohibits outdoor storage. The comment by the person is that they would like to see a use basically that covers self-storage, RV storage, and boat storage. The way we have it drafted right now is that you can either do self-storage or RV and boat storage. So if we would like to see a use combining all three of those, that's the person's request. Yes.
I have a comment. So this and the next two go together, right? There's three here that are pretty much about the same thing, which is boat, RV, and self-storage, or public storage, sorry. Here's my concern. I don't know how I feel about covering, whether it needs to be three-sided for boats and RVs. I know I'm going off here a little bit. Give me a second. But I do know that we cannot, we have to do is protect our environment from the stuff that falls out of RVs and boats specifically. And so I don't mind if RV and boat storage gets added. Again, I don't know how people feel about covering, whether it has to be four-sided, three-sided, one-side, whatever. But my concern is what's underneath it. And it has to be, nobody wants to drive down the street and see a whole bunch of boats piled up in somebody's yard. It doesn't look commercial, and it certainly means that all that fluid and stuff is draining into the ground, which we don't want. So I think what we have to do is revise the way we deal with this, because much like auto impound yards, which we don't need any more of, we have to be careful about what comes out of those vehicles and how we're going to have to deal with that in the long term. So I'm more concerned with what's under those vehicles when they're stored.
Mr. Enright Randall.
Yeah, I would agree that, what's underneath is a very good point. My thoughts on this matter is, instead of just kind of combining them all, is if you are permitted to do boat storage or RV storage, you should be able to allow just typical storage too, but not vice versa. If you want just regular storage, that doesn't necessarily mean you are permitted with RV or boats. Does that make sense, kind of? Because, why not be able to store, your gear if you in a little storage unit, and also your boat at the same location. That makes sense to me, and kind of maybe continuing to have these separated until we address like other concerns of like where it's being built and how the ground is going to be impacted by, potential fluids and such, and cleaning of, RVs and boats. That's my thoughts on there, is maybe a little flexible on if it's already permitted for RV and boats, but on the flip side, just kind of keep it as is.
Mr. Pittsford?
Where is RV and boat storage a separate use right now?
We don't actually have a use for RV storage.
Okay.
So we're adding RV, and it's combined with boat, which is going to be conditional in the institutional, limited business, permitted with standards in the light industrial, and permitted with standards in airport. However, self-storage is going to be conditional in general business and permitted with standards in airports. So the only overlap between those two is the airport.
So this is a rental place for storage?
rental.
I think we should eliminate further permission for self-storage facilities in our community. We have too many of them. We shouldn't be using our land for this. People should be more responsible with their belongings so that we don't have to overindulge the waste transfer stations that will in addition take more of our land. I just think that
We have seen a large increase in the number of self-storage applications.
I don't
I,
think they should be automatically permitted.
as somebody who drives a lot when he travels, because I do enjoy that, I am, and it's not just Monroe County, and it's not just Indiana. I'm frequently astounded at the amount of storage unit spaces that are out there. I was even surprised going through, I think it was Oklahoma, somewhere in there. There are places that actually rent by the day or a month at a time or whatever, a place to park your semi, because there's nowhere to get off the interstate and rest. And it's just a field. I mean, it literally is just an open field. So anyway, that's an aside that we probably don't deal with here. But because these are a thing, but with boat and RV storage, I think, areas near the lakes where people use boats, that's a good place to put those. RVs are different because people may want them closer to the house, but I think, where lakes are, boats should be, and I think boat storage should be near the lake. I think RVs should not be treated the same as a boat. Boats, by and large, do need to be stored inside or wrapped, which is now a more common thing too. So they wrap them to keep rodents and the like out of them. But my feeling is, though, that where you've already given up the use of self-storage, and to the extent that there's open area in those facilities, capturing that open space for boat and RV, maybe not boat, but for RVs, seems to be a practical way of dealing with that. That's just, and those are not real well thought out and definitely not very well expressed, but that's kind of what I was thinking. Sorry for the.
Would you say that you're suggesting, so boat storage and RV storage be separated. Do you want RV storage to be its own use, or would you combine
I
that
think-
with self-storage?
I think that RV storage should be, just like self-storage, it should be its own use and it should be conditional in general business. And that way, if you have a self-storage facility and you want to offer RV storage, they're all required to have asphalt or impervious surface, right? So that if there are fluid leaks and stuff like that, they're detectable and not seeping into grass or gravel.
But what she noted was that the only place where both of those overlap is airport, which is fine.
But I think that it should still be conditional at airport, not permitted with standards. I think the permitted with standards should be removed, and it should be conditional in all cases, so that there's more scrutiny and more standard of review.
For self-storage and for RV and boat, and or
Yes.
boat storage,
Yes.
conditional everywhere?
Everywhere.
Well, my question to staff would be, since I threw that out there, is putting in a separate use for boat and a separate use for RV overly burdensome to the ordinance?
We do have a section on mixed use, so if someone was not able to have one use as accessory, we are getting a lot of demand for RV. So if someone wanted to have self-storage and RV, they could opt for mixed use, and that's one of our designations. But the issue would be if those two uses don't align within one zone, then it can't be mixed use within that zone. It would almost have to be a PUD. So if we're seeing self-storage wanting a demand for RV, boat, and self-storage all on the same property, we should probably align at least one zone, which we have as airport. We could align GB as well to be conditional, so if they got the conditional use for each of those uses and they wanted to do mixed use, I guess we could do that under that use.
Okay, and do you think the idea of separating boat from RV is silly?
No, I think we've seen it more often demanded at self-storage locations, but I could see it also being with outdoor storage, boat storage. You know, I think it could go either way. It could either be its own, or it could be tied to either boat or self-storage, and I guess it could just be alone. That would make it.
Well, I also
Achievable.
would be concerned about a situation where someone would build or get approval for self-storage and they put up one structure for self-storage and then the whole rest of the property would be boats for a part of the year and then just a big void the rest of the year. You know, I mean, the opportunity to abuse that designation, if it's not separate, could occur.
Ms. Owens has her hand raised.
Thank you. You know, the people that live in town that have a driveway lucky enough to hold their car are the ones that need RV storage, and they need it fairly close. Out where I live, I can park RVs all over the place. I have plenty of room, but I'm not sure that boats have to go with RVs, but there are other kind of large things. There are trailers and other things that also need storage that can't sit in somebody's driveway in town. And so I think if you get too restrictive on it, that they'll have issues with that kind of storage. I think there are indeed lots of RVs that need to be stored and that we do need to think seriously about it.
So is it conditional in every instance, Commissioner Thomas?
So I'm going to comment on that. I think that's a really good point. My thinking is this is really a very hairy topic because it has to do with where this goes, what can and should be mixed together, and the environmental aspect of it as well. And all of those things come into play. So I'm wondering if this is something where we can ask staff to come back with some language, because I don't think we're going to be able to craft it at this table. But that's my take.
Just one general comment. It won't be fat or
Please.
long. I'll be
Please.
fast.
Please.
Oh, man, I'm glad I came here on my day off. Jerry, you showed up, so I won't break quorum when
We're
I
all
leave.
on our day off, Tron. We're all on our day off.
No,
We're not paid and we're
I
here
said I am
volunteering.
glad.
Thank you.
I-
Please,
so
yes.
Okay, the truth is when I try to speak and I'm looked at as my comments are going to be long or this, and, we've already had 12 minutes
Point of
run up on
order,
the first two.
that's not relevant. Please, point of order.
It doesn't.
Please, you said it would be quick. Please be respectful of other people's time.
Well, I'm
and
being truthful now.
Please be
And
respectful of other
I
people's
am,
time
and
and
I
get
was
to the point.
respectful earlier when we spent 30 minutes on the first two. My point being is, I really don't want to see this kind of drafted where it has to be a PUD. I think there's appropriate areas where this could serve the community and provide that storage that's needed. And if we accidentally don't permit it in different zones, and as Director Jelen stated, there's not going to be really any other opportunity than a PUD.
Colonel Ferris,
Further study is required.
all those in favor?
Could I make a
Yes.
comment before we continue?
Yes,
this close?
Mr.
I think
Morris.
as we're trying to move through these, and I know we still have a lot on the list, the last several that we've talked about, we've discussed for an extended period, and I think that's great. But I think we're landing on the further study required. So I'm going to try to chime in as we're going through the rest of these. And if it appears that further study is required earlier on, I'm going to try to speak up and see if I can steer us toward the
That would
next.
be helpful. Thank you.
Okay. I think that, as Commissioner Thomas noted, that was the discussion of all three of these together. So if it's further study is required, we're going to leave it as is, as drafted. So the next item is regarding tourist home provisions. And there's a request to restrict them either by standards or not allow them in certain zones. So we did have a note that staff did remove the ability for tourist homes to be located in the residential 1 zone, which was originally a concern. Sorry, this must have gotten. Would you like us to review the tourist home standards under the CDO to see if you would like to restrict the use further in different zones, or do you want to keep it as drafted currently?
Anyone for further restrictions?
Hold on, I'm still looking. How would this be restricted by standards? That was my question.
So under the current standards for the use, it states that it has to be 200 feet from a residence. So if someone is less than that, then they have to seek out a variance. Sometimes people do not proceed with the use if they know they can't meet that. Otherwise, they can get a variance, and that's subject to BZA approval. So I think the request is you could either remove it out of the use table for one of the zones, or you could look at the standards and say, let's say the lot size has to be 7 acres, or tourist home must be 300 feet from an adjoining primary use. That would be
So you're
what I
saying
understand their comment to be.
size of the lot could be one standard, feet from the next lot
Right.
line is another. Okay. It's, oh, God, I gotta get this. Sorry. Yeah, I gotta look something up real quick.
I just have a quick question, is the Airbnb thing, that's the tourist home?
It is. We've added a second use as well, which is the owner-occupied short-term rental, which we believe might address some of the restrictions that we're adding to tourist home or cabin. So we're allowing Airbnb for different uses, but tourist home or cabin is the most often utilized because people they buy the property, but they don't reside there, they just rent it.
Okay, right. So different standards for people using Airbnb to lease out their house that they live in, and that's fair. I think that was my concern, so thank you.
Are there any other points of discussion on this item?
I'm wondering if we should just, if it would make more sense to go conditional on, instead of permitted with standards. And I don't know, RNH seems small to me, because that could be 0.14 acres.
That's right.
And I know that condition is different.
I would be in favor of making it conditional rather than permitted with standards.
What's the downside?
Yes, there's no
A
downside.
lot of staff time. There's staff
Staff
time
time, right,
associated
that's-
with taking these all to the Board of Zoning Appeals. Right now, we have a page worth of standards, and we just make sure that they meet all of them.
I think the RNH is the one that's troubling me actually more than anything. Because the standards are really good, I think.
So could we
So-
put conditional on RNH?
But what would the condition be?
It
Because,
Or remove it then from the RNH?
Yeah.
Yes, Mr. Morris?
I agree with removing it from RNH simply because of the distance requirement. I'm not sure that it would,
it would work anyway.
yeah,
Yeah,
thank you.
yes.
So remove from RNH and change it from permitted with standards in the AGR, FOR, CVR to conditional?
No, leave permitted with standards, because I like the standards, but remove RNH as an option.
Okay.
Okay,
Is that a motion?
all those in favor? Okay, great. Dee's hand is raised. Tom's, okay.
Sorry, it took me a minute to get back to my notes.
Right, so now we're moving on to page 58.
Yes,
And I'll take these 3, 4, 5 together about dadus. So starting on page 58, there is a request to allow dadus to be in more zones. I'll pull up the land use table. And then there was something about attainable or affordable housing in the CDO. And that could be associated with the dadu regulation as well. And then people have concern with the maximum size of the dadu at 1,000 square feet. They would like to see a dadu allowed on less than 5 acres. And then someone asked that they not have to sign an affidavit that requires an owner to live on the property in order to have a dadu. So let me take text number 17 from the packet, and I'll pull over the use table with standards. So. So we currently have the use of accessory dwelling unit in our ordinance, and it's not changing very much. What is changing is limited to, I think we're going to allow it as a possible rental, one of them allowed to be short-term rented. We've discussed that internally. That is something that we get a lot of requests for. But right now, in front of you is a request to see about the size limitation, which is limited to 1,000. The minimum lot size requirement is also being edited here if it were to be allowed in the RNH. It's still 5 acres in the FOR, AGR, and CVR zoning districts. And then there was a concern about having to have one person live on the property and signing an affidavit. So do we want to take these separately? Do we want to start with just the first comment, which was allow dadus in more zones?
lot of density. Yes, Commissioner Thomas.
I'm not sure I like it in RNH, but I think it could be added to Res 1 with that same number 2 in the conditions, but using instead of RNH going to Res 1. So 1.25 acres, 800 square foot maximum. So take RNH off, because that could be 0.14. There's no way, right? and this would still keep it. So I agree that we can do this in more places. So that's my take on it.
If it were allowed in the res zone, would you want to see, okay, so it would have the same standards as the RNH, so it would be allowed to be on 1.25 acres if on
they're
septic?
right,
Okay.
right.
But that's 2 living units on 1.25 acres on a septic system.
Right, but the second living unit is only 800 square feet. So it's better there than in RNH in my book.
I don't think it belongs in either in terms of the rural area. If we want to keep the rural, this is not toward that objective. Mr. Enright Randolph?
I think this is a great opportunity to provide relief for some home buyers, but also provide a space for folks that, you know, they might want to do some caregiving for. That's why it's called a DADU or whatever versus a accessory dwelling unit. I guess my thought, what I think would be ideal, if they have an existing garage or something like that they just want to convert, and it's larger than 800 square feet, I think we should maybe consider that they're able to convert a existing garage to a DADU or accessory dwelling unit that could, be allowed outside of what we're saying the maximum is. So if it's existing, they could convert it, but if it's not, they can't build one larger. Just kind of a consideration because, you know, I think a lot of the goal here is to help relieve some of the costs that they incur by having another living dwelling unit on the property. And if they can convert a existing garage, that's going to reduce what they have to fork over to maybe have that relief. Or if they want to just, you know, care for somebody, being able to convert a existing detached garage or something, or a shed, and it's past the 800 square feet, I think should be allowed. But I understand if it's a new thing, we could put limits on it.
So that's point number 4 in the conditions, that you can convert an existing accessory structure. So I think my question would be, for those who are skeptical about Res 1, would it make you feel better if it had to be attached instead of being either attached or detached?
I mean, I just am keeping the rural. This does not tend toward that objective. Mr. Pittsford has his hand raised.
Yeah, the statement, keeping the rural, and this protecting that. So if I can't have a detached, I end up going through subdivision process, creating a separate lot of record, build a place for my in-laws, and now that residence is a separate lot of record. It's another house in the neighborhood, and it's there forever to be bought and sold, bought and sold, bought and sold. If I'm allowed to build it on my property, it's under my control. And if my in-laws want to live there until they die, and then I keep it just for guests who come for a week out of the year or whatever, then it's not a separate lot of record, and it doesn't expand the rural use for residential. So I don't think that argument of we should stop it here because of keeping rural holds any water with me.
Ms. Owens?
Yeah, thank you. I think that 800 and 1,000 square feet are pretty darn big. That's bigger than any apartments I've ever lived in, and I had plenty of space. So I think that that's okay. As far as rural versus urban, I think this seems to me to be something that people would use to take a garage or another outbuilding and to change it into something useful. I agree that it should not be a separate lot of record, that it should be on the same lot. If it's rural, 5 acres is a whole lot of land to have a little 1,000 square foot building on that would be called accessory. So I don't think that would change the character of the rural area myself.
And it is short-term rental eligible. Mr. Enright Randolph?
Thanks for pointing out the point 4. I just want to make sure that that does address kind of my comment where if it exceeds the 800 or 1,000 and it's a pre-existing structure, they convert it. Does the point 4 allow that? I'm reading it, but when I look at the point 2 here where it has maximums, it doesn't say like it could be larger or anything. So, you know, if that was the intent of point 4, so
The intent of point 4 was just so that before, or how it's currently drafted, it states that the converted structure has to meet current building code, which
Okay.
made it almost impossible to convert an older structure. So we're allowing it to be converted in use if it's not being further, you know, remodeled under a building permit. It doesn't need to be remodeled. They're just building a new structure. So that's what this is intended for. If we were to get into situations where you want to say, let's say it's being converted so they can go over a minimum, then you're going to be adding quite a bit of if this, then that, which we could do, but it's also ripe for a variance to say this is an existing
it could be
structure
a
on the
variance
lot.
process.
Yeah.
I would really like to see things kind of move away from a variance and be, you know, allowed. I agree with D's point too, that 800 square feet and 1,000 square feet is quite roomy, if you will. But I really think some of the goal here is to get, if folks want to do this, to allow them to do it, try to reduce the cost it takes for them to do it. And also, if we start looking at just the restraints of the property itself, and, you know, they have a larger garage that's like at 12,000 square feet, or wait, 1,200 square feet. 12,000 would be a big garage. Let's say that they don't really have another space on their property where they could build a 800 or 1,000. And, you know, we're now looking at, you know, having to take down the garage so they can use that space to create a dadu. So that's kind of my concern. And I think if we're able to achieve the right ordinance and if people are in agreement to allow it, that's what our goal should be here, because I think this is a great opportunity, and I'm very happy to be able to share my thoughts on it.
Okay.
Mr. Morris?
I'm going to, since we've been talking about this for a minute, I'm hearing support for allowing dadus in Res 1. I'm going to make a motion that we vote to approve that.
Using the RNH condition,
Correct.
but deleting RNH.
Correct.
Is D hand up? I think that is.
No.
Okay.
Oh,
Oh,
yes.
yeah, it is.
Yes, it is.
Okay.
Yeah, I just want to point out, for the purpose of giving credit to staff for incredibly good advanced thinking, this provision in number 4 protects future residents of those accessory dwelling structures. So somebody converting a garage is going to be subject to livability standards, and I think that's fantastic anticipatory action. It does decrease demand for variances, and as someone who's lived in an apartment over a 2-car garage, 800 square feet is not nearly as much as you think it is.
I would also like to make a motion on the requirement that an owner be in residence on the property. I think we need to keep that the same, because otherwise we're going to see the abuse of this, and it's not going to be to anybody's benefit. So I would like
But
to.
it's not accessory if
All right.
there's no.
I'd like to keep that requirement in place.
Okay. And then the next, I think we did discuss the 1,000 square foot dadu.
Did we get a vote on that?
Keep the 1,000 and the
I think
800.
D,
D's hands was up.
okay.
Okay. And then dado on less than 5 acres in the CVR, AGR, and FOR. Is there any request for that to change?
I'm in support of allowing it on less than 5 acres. I mean,
Rental property.
I don't, 5 acres is a lot of property. Some of these minimums are
Can we
quite
eliminate-
huge, so I
Can we
think.
eliminate rental properties? Can we eliminate the option to conduct these as rentals?
I can get to that point. If we could, I think that I'm not seeing a vote on that, so it fails. So we'll keep it as drafted in number 2 on the screen. For FOR, AGR, and CVR, the minimum lot size is 5 acres. And then ADU-DADU is limited to a 1,000 square feet livable. Minimum lot size for the Res 1 must be 0.5 acres for lots connected to sewer. I think I would change that to
Yeah,
1
1
acre.
acre, yep.
And then 1.25 acres for septic and
Right.
limited to 800. Okay, so just to make sure I clarified that. And then, Margaret, your point, while we're on this, you wanted to look at point number 13, which is new. If an ADU or DADU could be used as a short-term rental owner occupied, would you like to only see it be used for long-term rental, so more than 30 days, or for an in-law or someone like that?
I see what you're, I see. I think long-term is better than short-term, just because of the traffic in what are rural areas. And long-term rental could be the in-laws, it could be the caregiver, it could be whatever. I mean, so obviously you have to have that option, because the owner cannot occupy both structures. So you have to have a long-term rental opportunity, right? That's the only other way that's the only way you're gonna have anybody in that place. Short-term rental, I'm a little bit torn on, because it does create issues, especially like I would not want it in the Res 1, because that's too close to the neighbor. So at least that one I would say should not be short-term rental. But I'm torn on the others. I can see an issue.
Mr. Pittsford?
It's sort of interesting, because here with the requirement that the owner be in one of the structures, as a primary residence, the short term actually puts them on the property for the short term, which is what we worry about in other instances where they're absent. So here they're present and they meet the requirement that we worry about with short-term rentals, and that is an absentee landlord. Here they're required to be a present landlord, but we don't want to use it for short-term rental. That defies my logic. So that bothers me. I think if they want to use it for short-term and they live there, then they should be allowed to.
I agree with that, and my thought is, I understand the concerns of like a lot of these turning into like Airbnb. I think that's really kind of the larger question that's not being really addressed. I don't think that's going to occur in a way that's going to be very negative to our community or the neighbors. I mean, look at the size of lots. You have to even be able to add it on. So I agree that if the owner of the property lives there and wants to, rent it out for a month, they should be permitted. That could be family too. Hey, some relatives have more money than you, and they might pay to stay in your dadu. So I agree with that. I think there's a lot of provisions here to address maybe what I think is the larger concern is these all being turned into like Airbnb setups.
Commissioner Thomas?
I think it would be detrimental to have all of these as Airbnbs. I think that would be really a bad thing, and it doesn't do anything to alleviate the housing situation. That's the goal. The goal is to try to provide housing for folks. And I would at least like to see short-term rental in the Res 1 area removed. That's my
I put the
motion.
definition of short-term rental owner occupied up for, okay.
So your motion's
To remove short-term rental from residential in ADU-DADU section.
But keep it for the other zones in which it's permitted.
Keep it for the other
Okay.
zones for now.
Okay.
I don't know if Dee's hand is raised or not. Yes? Okay. Now, I'm a little lost because we took some things together and,
I think we actually made it through everything.
okay, great. So,
The agricultural event center, There was a question about whether it needed to be limited to 40 events per year, and we wanted to know if anyone wanted to revisit that. As added context, since 2015, we've only seen one agricultural event center be built and utilized in the county.
I have a question.
Yes.
Have you had folks come into the planning department and ask about an ag event center, and then they're told they can only have 40 events a year, and then they say, no, I'm not going to do it?
In my experience, most of the cases that would involve an event center is folks come in and start talking about potentially having weddings or other private events on their property, and then we direct them to the definitions in the zoning code, which are agricultural event center or event center, the latter being only permitted in a business district. So then once we get into the discussion of what an agricultural event center is and all the restrictions and it being conditional, then most of the time folks just kind of drop the idea.
Okay. I'm just concerned because we've had some really bad problems. We've had some real issues with some ag event centers, and I just worry. I think 40 is a lot anyway. It's almost once a week, but.
Commissioner Githens?
I have a question about the duration of an event. Can this go over 3 days, 5 days? How long can each individual event last?
That's a good question. So typically when we say event, if you're having a Friday night rehearsal, Saturday wedding, Sunday brunch, there is one, the one that is permitted in the county. They also have an accessory tourist home, if you will, on the property where people stay overnight. So we've considered that to be one booking and one event for the purposes of that restriction.
Can we just leave this the way it is currently?
But the reason I bring that up is what
Pardon me?
if an event can last for 2 weeks?
I see.
Burning Man.
Oh, heaven
Yes.
forbid.
Mr. Enright Randolph?
Great question, Ms. Githens, Commissioner Githens. I agree. Not knowing the length of a event is puts us in a precarious situation. I'm kind of, either way. My initial knee-jerk reaction is like, there's 52 weeks in a year, so I would be comfortable of moving it to 52 so they could, be operational every weekend. And that's kind of my thought is an event typically, as Director Jelen stated, was kind of like Friday, Saturday, Sunday. I'm in support of things like that because, that allows them to maximize the opportunity to make this center functional. We've talked about businesses creating money and things like that, but also we need to make sure that they're able to operate where they can meet their overhead costs and yield a profit. So we do have these types of event centers. I've been to a couple of event centers, and I think they're really gorgeous. I think it's a great use of the property. I think the way that they take care of the property is a lot better than if it didn't have anything on it at all.
So is your motion to see if we could increase it to 52?
I'm just kind of sharing my comments and opinion more for the public because I think I know the way this is going to go.
Yes. Colonel Ferris?
I'm having problems on what the issue is. What's wrong with status quo? The only thing that I would support is what Penny said over here is about the length and duration. If somebody's going to be out there for 2 weeks versus a weekend, that could be a problem. That's the only. Have any length restrictions at all embedded anywhere in this document?
No, and I think that's a great idea. We could add it under the context of B. It already says, for purposes of this provision, an event is a celebration, ceremony, wedding, reception, corporate function, or similar activity. We could add a sentence here that says an event is no more than 48 hours, or something like that. We could limit it like that, or we could define it further.
I think an event is no more than 48 hours. It could go to 24 hours, but 48 hours is a weekend. Pardon me?
I think if you start on a Friday with a rehearsal dinner, like for a wedding, have the wedding on Saturday, and then you have the brunch on Sunday, I think a 72-hour limit,
It's 3 days.
yeah.
Monthly is 3 days. It's Friday,
Mr.
Saturday, Sunday.
Pittsford?
Okay, I have a couple of thoughts. Number one, I think we're trying to solve a problem that doesn't exist. Number two, we're not issuing permits for these, so this is not permitted in terms of somebody comes in and draws a permit. So we're not policing these. So to add limitations to it and then say the neighbors get to be the enforcers by filing complaints with zoning 2-3 weeks after it's happened and nothing can be done about it is just creating headaches for staff, creating headaches for the property owner, creating false impressions for the neighbors that they actually have some say in how their neighbors use their event space that's approved. I don't want to do this. I think putting the limitation of 40 events per year is a false signal to neighbors. It's a false impression that we're policing this, and we're not. I don't think we ought to do it.
Commissioner Thomas? I'm in favor. Okay.
Okay, the next item is regarding accessory livestock. This was a request to allow chickens wherever the city of Bloomington allows them and allow the lot sizes to be much smaller. So we did add some context on page 61 of the packet, and we believe we've satisfied most of the concerns. So our question is, does the Plan Commission wish to edit anything on page 61 of the packet further than what is below?
What, can you tell me what part was this, because I have it black and white. What was the bold, if only applicable to?
No,
what?
so this is kind of the response in sum. So we've added some possible solutions. So this was a little bit larger than just the accessory livestock concern, but we've, on page 62, what we've added specifically to chickens at the bottom is that we're saying 4 animals per 0.125 acre. If lot size is less than 1 acre, you may not have any roosters. If you have less than 0.125 acres, no small livestock is allowed, and livestock containment must meet a 10-foot setback. We originally had this, I think, as 4 animals per 0.25 acres. So now it's, instead of 16 animals per acre, you could have 32.
Is there a limit on how
matches
many
the
dogs you can have in that zone?
So that's under the Animal Management Division. There is an ordinance. They regulate domesticated animals, and there's no other division that really regulates livestock, so that's why we have this in here.
Yeah, chickens and rabbits as livestock, considering their sizes, and I know, I just, God, again, I think we're borrowing trouble, but
Yeah,
that's just me.
I think that, first of all, we're getting into trouble by borrowing from the city's language. I mean, this was a point of distinction between people who live in the county and people who live in the city throughout the annexation deliberation. They felt that there was a significant difference and advantage to living in the county versus living in the city with regard to their ability to tend flocks of chicken, for example. And they stated this over and over again throughout the remonstration period. So I don't know exactly how it changes from what we had to what the city has, and why we are aligning the city as a standard at all is confusing, except we have the same consultant, which is, you know, they're not listening to us.
So the chickens, the way we have it in the current ordinance, it's stricter than the city.
Mm-hmm.
So we're making it more lenient now in the CDO,
Mm-hmm.
which the city already allows it in these numbers. So we would be aligning or making it easier to have chickens in the county than in the city.
Mr. Morris?
I think that living in the county, we should have lesser restrictions on chickens, so I would move that we approve the way staff has it written on page 62.
All those in favor?
Right. Then the next item was that there was a concern for the limitation of the number of accessory structures. We currently have a limitation on accessory structures in all zones except for the rural residential AGR, CVR, and FOR. Does anyone wish to allow more detached accessory structures than 4 in any of the more dense residential zones?
Commissioner Thomas, did you?
I think to be clear, is that this is not the same as a deck or a porch, but it could be a pool.
Right.
It could be a tennis court for the millionaires out there. But you can't use an RV. And I'm just I'm scratching my head trying to think about how many structures somebody could possibly want on one piece of property. And I go, chicken coop, since we just talked about that, detached garage, shed.
Silo.
No, we're not talking about ag.
Is there a definition here that I'm missing? I'm
It's on the definition sheet.
Would
so
like
you'd
a
have to-
greenhouse, was that just what you
Can I see the
mentioned?
definition
Would
of
that
what
be an
this is,
accessory?
please?
So I pulled up the standard.
She's got it there.
So I pulled up the standard in the CDO. This is accessory buildings or structures, and this comes from this note number 5. No more than 4 accessory buildings or structures.
I got that. I want the definition of what the accessory building or structure is.
Okay, sure. Let me get to that.
That's what we're talking about.
Right. But if somebody wanted more, they would have to come in for a variance, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. So they have an out. They could come in for a variance. They can come to the BZA and say, I need a second greenhouse or whatever it is. So they have an option. They can come to the BZA for a variance if they want 5 or more. So there's already a,
Again, my question is what is it?
It's
What
on the
is the-
screen now, so.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Would the dad
I'm having a hard
dude,
time seeing the screen, that's the problem.
would the dad dude be considered an accessory? I mean, I assume, yes, okay, thank you. And
but in the standards, it clearly says an RV is not an accessory structure, right? Right.
Right.
So if you look in both places, you can get the full definition. So maybe changing this definition to be more complete. What is not an accessory structure might be useful.
It's not included.
Yes.
The following are not included.
Right, it includes an ADU. I'm sorry, a DADU. It does not include an RV, right? So those kinds of things might be helpful.
As Commissioner, yes.
So continuing my discussion here is, do we know what a building is? And do we know what a structure is?
Yes. A lot of definitions. Let me scroll down to that.
Because if you don't, I can call anything almost anything.
Here's building.
Building.
Just a moment. Does a building require plumbing? No.
No.
So then it's not it seems like a structure, not a building. Ugh. Okay.
Building is a roof structure. A
Okay.
structure could be 3-sided. It could be a lean-to. It could be a,
Bridge.
there you go.
A bridge could be a structure.
So do you define structure in here somewhere?
Structure is one of the more basic, base level definitions. It's on the screen now.
That could be a stick fort in your backyard. Without a roof.
Yes.
treehouse.
I'm just thinking about our HOA and some of the issues we
Yep,
have in our
yep.
neighborhood right now.
I hear you.
It's good to have you think about that. Yes, Tron?
Yeah, I think there's a lot that could be categorized or distinguished as a structure or accessory. My question, though, well, actually, I want to say, what if you're just thinking of like a playhouse for your children? Does that then fall into a accessory? Just if just
So,
I
yeah,
just
no,
it
it's
just
a good
starts getting
question.
pretty vague. So like
I think we expanded it, and I don't know that that was intentional. I think we would suggest we're going to go ahead and edit it to be for accessory buildings. We're going to leave off structure because that could count
right.
playgrounds. So I think I would suggest it to minimally change to say just accessory buildings.
But my question is, we've talked about a lot of variances as far as other ways to achieve some of this. Would you just, kind of quickly summarize the way that the BZA looks at cases and how they have to, have evidence to support or deny those? Could you just kind of touch on that real quickly? Because a lot of these things are being lumped in. They can get a variance, but I think it's important for me to have the refresher, but also to just go on record so folks understand what that variance process looks like.
I will say that for this standard in general, we've had very few concerns or variance requests for it. I can't even think of one in recent history, but I can pull up the
In the CDO.
the design standards for the variances right now.
And I think if anything, if we're reviewing a permit and we see too many structures that don't fit, the person picks the worst one that's the most dilapidated and they remove it.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, and the information on BZA cases is already in the CDO, so I really don't want to take time to go over that now. I just don't think that's a good use of our time since it's in here already.
Yeah, and I want to say where this is concerned and is probably, it's no secret, but we often don't say it out loud, but this is passive enforcement stuff. So if somebody has 4 structures and the 5th structure is a smaller little playhouse or something like that, nobody's driving around the county looking to see if somebody's got a 5th structure or, shed or whatever. It exists so that when people become burdensome to their neighbors, or when they come in to get a new property, we review and make sure that they're not overburdening the property with structures. So to say that 4 is this limit and we are enforcing it like the speed limit, it's just not happening. So it's a mechanism to achieve an end in the event that it's necessary. So I just want to. So I don't care if it's 4 or 5.
I'd like to make a motion that we leave the number at 4 and then remove the word structure and just keep it as building.
I'll buy that.
Okay, so we're on to standards for outdoor shooting range.
Yes. So
Take a few minutes.
you can.
Thanks. Good idea. I need to get up.
You want to come back at
So should we
To-
establish it's a break? I think last time we did it and didn't notice, they just kept recording. So
Yeah, it'll be
would
a
you like
break
to?
until 2:40. Let's do that. That's 6
Okay,
minutes.
thank you.
Okay, well,
Well, we'd like to reconvene this meeting, and I'd like to ask my colleague, President Jeff Morris, to take control of the meeting and oversee it, and maybe we'll be able to get through some of these things. Thank you, Mr. Morris.
You're welcome. So let's go ahead and re-adjourn the meeting, and we'll try to fly through the rest of these topics in the next hour before we
Re-adjourn?
re-adjourn. Is that a
No,
word?
no,
Like reconvene. I think we're all tired at this
Yeah,
point.
we are. Yeah.
I'll do my best here. So we are on the standards for the outdoor shooting range, Jackie.
Yes, so as I noted in the packet, this was discussed at an earlier ordinance review committee. I would like the public and the plan commission to understand that we added this use into the use table because of the state legislation around this requirement that we cannot prohibit these types of uses in the county. So this is, again, becoming in line with the state code, maybe not a desirable use for Monroe County, but one of those uses we need to add to make sure we're in compliance with state code. So the question is, the person had concerns for outdoor shooting range, and so the best that we believe we could do is take a look at any of the conditions as presented and potentially come up with more conditions regarding the design or requirements in the county. And I may refer to our attorney who has stepped away for a second for additional questions, but I just want to note that it wouldn't be probably advised to change the minimum acreage to say 1 million acres, knowing that that doesn't exist. So, but I'll let you look at these conditions, and if you want to keep them as is, we can. This was borrowed from another jurisdiction, I believe, in Washington. There weren't many uses that we found applicable to Monroe County, but this one seemed to be reasonable in this.
I have
the
a quick
CDO.
question, sorry. When does a casual use of individually designed shooting range become subject to these standards? When they advertise, when they charge for use, what's the point at which we would actually be involved in enforcing this standard?
So the definition in the CDO is helpful here. It says an area designed and operated for the use of rifles, shotguns, pistols, muskets, or similar firearms that are fired at silhouettes, skeet, trap, paper, stillboard, or other similar targets. Does not include a facility owned or operated by a municipal corporation, county, township, police district, or joint police district, and does not include accessory or incidental target areas on private property infrequently used by private property owner. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it's kind of vague, but I guess once the neighbors complain, that will suffice for legal definitions. And I'd also point out, I think it's steel board and not still board.
Commissioner Thomas?
It's whether somebody's doing that as a business. I mean, that's a club, it's a business, right? So it's conditional in heavy industrial and mineral extraction. I think that's fine, because neighbors will be notified.
I think that's fine.
I'm fine with it as it is.
Yeah, Mr. Knight Randolph.
I think I'm hearing this right. This will mitigate potential legal issues by not allowing this type of use. So we are now allowing it being conditional. It isn't part of allowing it. It just means it's conditional, right? So
It is allowing it with conditions.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Okay.
My main point is to mitigate any type of legality issues that we could incur by not allowing that type of use. And if this meets that, then
Yep.
I'm in complete support.
Okay. So I've heard two people in support now. So is that a motion to keep this as is? All in favor? And Dee's hand is raised as well.
And I stand corrected, it is still board. There are steel boards, but still board is the terminology that's used.
Hey, Jackie, the next comment is encouraging us to reevaluate the CDO.
Yes, so I'll take the next three on this page together. Those are mostly some comments or ideas for the request for more implementation or allowance for affordable housing or workforce housing. So we've added some items in red to see if there's a request to look at the conversion map showing the total acreage within each zoning district. We can take a look at that and evaluate these comments, but I wanted to first put these on the screen so you could read those, and then if you wanted to have us open up the conversion chart and have this discussion, we could do that.
I think, yeah, Commissioner Thomas.
What I'm finding is that a lot of folks don't think that rural includes residences, and it does. And between what we've done already and the ADUs and DADUs, we have opened up a whole bunch of opportunities. Do not ever use workforce housing again, because that's anyone age 18 to 65 who could be a millionaire banker or it could be hauling trash. Workforce means nothing. So But I understand some people believe that housing is necessary. We need to do our housing inventory, which next, right, down the road. We need to figure out what we have in Monroe County, what we're lacking, and deal with it then. I don't think a knee-jerk reaction is the right thing to do for our residents.
We agreed at the beginning of this whole process that the term affordable housing was meaningless because it's not defined and.
Well, affordable housing is defined by the federal government.
Yes.
And nobody's meeting that.
Though
That's a very
nobody's
different
meeting
thing.
that,
Right,
yes.
and workforce means what? Attainable for who? I mean, it's nebulous,
Yes, so,
intentionally so.
yes.
Mr. Gray Randolph?
I assume this is going to occur, but I guess we will be tracking, some significant changes in the impacts moving forward, right? And then, sorry for my shameless pitch, but I think with the expanding GIS program, there could be ways that could really make this easier for you to track and also do kind of that survey kind of analysis that Commissioner Thomas just mentioned. So I'll advocate for working with the GIS division to really kind of put some mechanisms in. So if someone calls, you can just kind of flag it and then that data is there and then we're able to do a larger analysis, because I do think it's really important for us to understand the impact that these changes are going to have on our community.
Yeah, Mr. Pittsburgh?
Yeah, thank you. My part in this is just really briefly stating that, honestly, at this point, these kind of discussions, or these kind of, not discussions, these kind of concerns listed here are going to be addressed in zoning amendments and appeals, and people are going to have to make very specific cases. Yes, we did our hearings to the extent that we did, whether it was sufficient in our view or sufficient in the view of the public is now irrelevant. The document is going to go forward. These are very specific concerns that can be addressed in very specific ways, and the law allows for it. And my feeling is I don't want to spend more of my hours having discussions about angels and heads of pins anymore. Let the process do what it's going to do.
Okay. Any further comments? Seeing none, I'm going to make a motion that we take no action on the final 3 lines on this page.
We are on to the final page of the text. And if we get through this, then we can come back to the 2 tabled map items. Okay, so I will take the first 2 items together on page 66, which is an I-69 corridor zoning should allow for higher zoning permissions, and then possibly, if not by right zoning, an I-69 overlay should be considered. So the question is, do you wish us to look at the draft CDO map and consider around the I-69 area some parcels that could be maybe higher intensity zoning, or whether you would like to draw in an overlay near the I-69 area?
I would like to leave things as they are. I don't think that an overlay is ever been proven to be useful in our experience. Maybe elsewhere it has been, but we've never had luck with it. So I'd like to just leave things as they are. We've already accommodated for I-69 in a number of ways.
Agreed?
Can I make a statement, though?
Yeah.
In addition to that, I don't disagree that there are opportunities that need to be investigated on 69. I think there are uses that can be appropriate to 69 that are not really anticipated or taken care of in this CDO. I do think that opportunities for truck parking, for, like rest stop kind of things, because there's there's no rest stop between Indianapolis and Evansville. So Monroe County could be an area where that might be appropriate. And I don't know that our zoning ordinance has an allowance for that kind of use, really, so.
It would have to, for us, it would have to be a truck travel plaza, but I was at an NDOT meeting a few weeks ago. There's one rest area plan between Monroe County and Evansville, closer to Monroe County. And there's another one planned between us and Indy, I think between Martinsville and Indy specifically.
Okay, good. And I think it would be great to have some sort of cooperative study between the marketplace that deals with trucking industry and tourism, or, you know, not necessarily tourism, but opportunities. Well, yeah, maybe even some tourism. I mean, are there opportunities? How do you get gas between Indianapolis and Evansville? You know, is Monroe County going to have no other than what exists on the west side right now? Is that going to be it for 69 and food and gas opportunities in the county? You know, is it all just going to fall into Greene County and then, you know, Lawrence County or whatever? So I don't know.
Okay, moving on to the next item. Higher density is currently proposed around the city of Bloomington. Without sewer, this will not be possible. Jackie?
But could I just make a general grouping notation? It seems to me that the remaining items on the page are all focused around that theme. Is it possible to take them all together? Because they don't seem, I think that everything we've done thus far works toward some of these goals, while at the same time preserving what we have, and that some things that are being requested there, like higher density without the adequate acreage for a septic system, aren't possible. So it seems to me as though they could be grouped together and we could move on. I don't know.
I do feel like all of these questions are either going toward less density or more density, either because of the city or because of housing or because of Ellettsville. And it doesn't, and not enough light industrial. 25 acres is not that much. But I just feel like we've covered this.
Yes.
We've addressed this sufficiently throughout this entire course. And again, more around the highway again.
Yes.
More density, more density. So I think we've addressed all of these. I read through the white paper more than once. I don't see a need to address any of these again. I mean, we've looked at all of this. We've talked about all of this. I'm happy to move forward.
Yeah, Mr. Knight Randolph.
Mine comment kind of goes in line with like looking at all of these, but just a different, I guess, focus on my comment. I do think the connection to sewer is going to be kind of a dicey situation for a while, so that's unfortunate. I don't think we need to kind of have a release valve where people can just put a septic in, because I mentioned earlier, I'm not really in support of that. People have different opinions on those topics. But I guess my real point here is, you know, if we don't have like maybe appropriate zoning for maybe a bit more density or a bit more intensive use, and let's say they are conditional and they have to have sewer, so they can't really actually do that until that issue is resolved, I feel like we're going to see people voluntarily annex into the town or the city that are adjacent. And if we really want to maybe address that concern, we need to have zoning that might allow that type of density. So whenever we get, you know, through this ability to hook onto sewer or not, would be good, because maybe the developers will, you know, want to acquire the property and just kind of wait until that scenario plays out and then potentially build on it. But my larger concern, if they don't have that predictability outside of the uncertainty of when sewer could be established, I just see a lot of voluntary annexation going on. And maybe if we focus on providing some of what we're hearing back from folks, they might want to wait until they can hook up to sewer and stay in the county, because I think there's a lot of pros and cons on all sides. And if we don't have that zoning, I think we're kind of almost forcing some folks to choose the annexation route versus staying in the county and waiting to have sewer.
Thank you, Mr. Randolph. Mr. Ferris?
I agree with Julie, and I put a motion on the table for all remaining items on page, whatever this is,
66.
that we take no action.
Okay, Dee's hand is raised as well.
I want to be clear too, for the record, that my support for that is based in part on previous comments made. We're at a point where annexation request for rezoning consideration is where these things are going to be settled.
As they should be.
Yes, they should.
Thank you, Mr. Pittsford. So Jackie, I think we have two topics left, the Clear Creek area and the area south of Bloomfield Road. Is that correct?
That's correct. And we did put an addendum into the same location where you get the Plan Commission administrative packet. So we have the one request is the first area for consideration is the Clear Creek area for RNH. It was requested that we add 4 columns of data for consideration. That was the legal acreage, the property class description, its current zoning, and then the draft CDO zoning. Tammy helped put this together, and she did help color code some of these. And Tammy, if you want to describe any more about the color coding for the folks here.
Thank you, Tammy.
Hold on.
I was going to adjourn.
Thank you, Mr. Randolph. Have a good
Yeah.
weekend.
You're not adjourning the meeting, you're
Well,
leaving.
no, I was
Okay,
going to
thank you.
leave. If I may, just a quick 5 seconds, 10 seconds. I really appreciate everyone's discussion, dialogue through this. I'm not sure if we'll be continuing another discussion, so this is my one opportunity since I have to leave early. Thank you, everyone. Really appreciate the hard work that has went into this. This is not an easy thing, and thanks one last time.
Thank you, Mr. Randolph.
And then a special thanks to the commissioners for attending these. I really value that, and I really appreciate that. So thank you.
Thank you.
Sure, anyway.
Commissioner Thomas, did you have your hand raised before Tammy gets started?
So, I spent, after I made that wild and crazy proposal last time, I spent a lot of time going over each and every parcel. And my suggestion is rather simple. First, you have to remove the PUDs out of here, which I think they are at this point. Second, I would, because it is the zoning that encompasses non-conforming lots, et cetera, I would move that the eligible non-commercial Clear Creek area properties, non-school, be moved to Res 1, except for the following 4 parcels. 4848 South Rogers Street, which would become RNH. 4858 South Rogers Street, which would become RNH. 4878 South Rogers Street, which would become RNH. And 4868 South Rogers Street, which would become RNH. These are all the historic, I believe, mostly historic structures in an already dense area. That is so simple. I went through and that's where I ended up.
Can you identify those parcels again, and maybe by the name of property owner?
Sure. Blind Squirrels, 4848 South Rogers Street. That's on the second page of the initial, whatever. I'm using the first spreadsheet. And then, just past the halfway point on the first page, Bruce, 4858 South Rogers Street, Good Road, oh, I'm sorry, not Good Road, Blind Squirrels, 4878 South Rogers, and J. Alexander Properties, 4868 South Rogers. So Bruce, J. Alexander, and 2 Blind Squirrels. And I don't know if we should have that Duke property, how we should zone it. And I don't know what we should do with the cemetery, and I don't know what we do with the school. But whatever it is, the residential side of it should be Res 1. And here's why, because these are all non-conforming lots. There are a lot of little tiny sliver lots that are owned by and abut another property. So they're too small to be useful, but if they combine the two, they make, yeah.
Same.
So that's my recommendation.
So the remainders remain are at residential 1?
Yes.
Okay.
Except I don't know what to do with the Duke property, and I don't know what to do with the cemetery, and I don't know what to do. I think everything is viable in Res 1, including the utilities and the cemetery, from what I could tell, and the school and the church.
I agree with that.
So, after all my
That's good.
machinations, it came down to that.
Yeah. I would like to concur with Commissioner Thomas's recommendation and move that we approve that.
I just have one,
Yes.
can I ask you a
Yes.
question? Do you guys see any problem with that?
So just to clarify, the first half of the spreadsheet on the screen here, they're currently drafted as CD, so everything in the far right-hand column you'd be changing to res with the exception of the 4 addresses listed. That would be okay if they're substandard lot sizes, as long as they can meet all other development standards such as setbacks and things like that.
They're all pretty much built on. And the ones that aren't have plenty of space.
Yeah.
So, and it's because of the flooding in the area, there's a lot of other considerations.
Yes.
That really worries me a lot.
I appreciate it,
And
to
since
keep
we-
the density down in floodplain.
Yeah, it's too floody.
Yeah, Mr. Pittsford?
I would make the observation too, whether this quote-unquote gets everybody in that would like to be in, it establishes a rural neighborhood in that area and establishes the opportunity to make the argument a property should be included in that, which I think
Yeah.
is where failing, given exactly what was proposed, which is not appropriate, this is as close as you can come, and if anything's missed, the opportunity's there to make a good case.
Yeah, we can rezone. I encouraged Mr. Cassidy to pursue a historic overlay for this area. You know, if that happens, then we can talk again about different zoning. I just think for now, given the flooding issues, this is where we should be.
All those in favor? Okay. Great. Oh, sorry.
All those in favor of Margaret taking over?
I'm sorry.
Okay, so
Sorry.
you're fine.
We're all tired, it's okay.
So
Thank
Jackie,
you
is there
for
anything
levity.
we need to discuss with the 4 properties that we did not include in that motion?
Oh, I assumed in the motion was everything but those 4 properties would be res, and then those 4 properties would be R and H.
Yeah, that was
Okay,
it.
okay,
That
that's
was
that
it.
part.
Okay.
Yeah, thank
All
you.
right, thank you. So then the next area, the last section for discussion that we had was the area south of Bloomfield Road and north of the Sudbury PUD area. And there was again, request to add the 4 columns. And I do recall now the color coding is regarding the legend that we handed out. So the color coding is for which zone most closely fits their existing legal lot acreage. I can pull this up on the CDO website as well.
Okay. Ms. Bierman, can I ask a question? Ms. Bierman, would you talk about the flooding and drainage issues in this area?
Well, Jackie, do you mind throwing the
I will.
flood layer on there?
Thank you.
Because I can kind of envision it to
Yeah.
some degree.
I know for people in that area that it's an issue.
Yeah, and this is still kind of like the headwaters for the Clear Creek area where we do experience people flooding downstream from there as well. I mean, these don't exactly have, they're not in the floodplain per se. But if, we're not, the more impervious surface that you put into an area, the faster it's going to run off, the faster it's going to impact people downstream. So unless there's some sort of, bioretention or something like that coming into play to slow that flow of water during large storm events, it could be hazardous to people downstream.
Okay. Again, given the issues with flooding, and a lot of the stormwater issues we're getting here are not even connected with anything the county's doing, it's coming from the city. But given that, I would make a motion that we move these properties into Res 1 as non-conforming and all those other things that are accommodated in that, and we can look at other potential opportunities for development once we have a better sense of what's really going on here. But there are some commercial properties in here, and so those would need to be zoned commercial, and I don't know which one. So I leave that to staff. I don't know which zone, LB or GB.
They're currently not zoned commercial,
Yeah,
but to make
so-
them conforming.
Yeah, I would make those commercial, whichever they fit in. I'm not sure what's going on with Allen Street, how many structures there are, and we might be able to address that. I think that one's for sale. And then the auto sales service, I think, fits into GB, right? If I remember correctly. We'll do a quiz bowl next on provisions of the CDO. Anyway, that's my motion. It's very long-winded, sorry.
Okay, Ms. Clemens.
This
you have
is
your
one
hand
of
raised.
the commercial zones. This is the bland auto. And then the other one that was taxed for commercial was this one. However, I'll note that we've been in discussions with the prior owner about the fact that the zoning is residential, and so it was one of those situations where it's been used commercially but zoned residentially, and it's been well known.
Well, I'm going to leave that one up in the air, and I'm going to leave the auto sales service up in the air, but the other lots, I would recommend Res 1.
Okay, well, there are a lot of, so for example, Muncie Associates LLC, is that going to be Res 1? That's 18 acres.
That is not in, it's not an active,
Second page.
it's not an active, it's unplatted, vacant. So that would be Res 1.
I'd keep it Res 3.5, or?
No, RS 3.5 is the city zone, which is 3.5 houses per acre. No,
Okay,
more than
no,
that.
no.
Sorry, that's more than that. But anyway, you don't,
No, I would do the,
Res 1.
I would do CBR or something, or
Okay.
CBR there, or ag, since it's unplatted.
Okay.
And the same is true with the bottom 10 properties.
Anything over 2 acres?
Yes.
I'd be willing to do CBR there,
Oh, yes.
except for the 2 commercial lots.
Yes.
Again, we don't know.
Yes,
We don't know.
exactly.
I'm okay with that.
I think one of those is like a limestone product, concrete product sales. And then there's bland tow away service and stuff. So,
So everything,
the last 10, starting with Lamb, Kelby, Rebecca on South Quarry Lane, which is a vacant, unplatted lot, on down, I would do CVR 2.5.
you started higher than I did. Okay.
Might be.
You started with 1 acre.
So wouldn't you start with Clendenning at 2.1? No, you're starting up at, okay, so you're starting at 1.72
That's right.
acres and beyond, you're saying CVR.
Yeah, see, there's a vacant platted lot, yeah. And there's another one up above, there's more up above it too, but,
If the if anything under 2 acres is zone residential 1, it still wouldn't be able to be subdivided.
Yeah, it can't be subdivided anyway, so
It
I
would
would,
require an acre of
Yeah.
each lot.
okay,
so I would start with Clendenning William.
okay,
Is that okay?
yep,
All right, so I'll amend my motion.
okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so what is your motion?
Okay, reading through the chart, everything on page 1 becomes Res 1. On page 2, everything is Res 1 up to and including 915 West Allen Street.
1915.
1915 West Allen Street. Then 1903 West Allen, 1875 West Allen, 1337 South Corey, South Beech Tree Lane, 1311 South Corey, 1907 West Allen, 1789 West Allen, and the generic South Corey Lane called Muncie Associates. Those go to CVR. There are 2 commercial properties, and I asked the staff to zone them appropriately per their current use. That's my motion.
Okay, I second that. Okay, and D is in approval.
Okay, Jackie, do we want to talk about the 2 commercial properties now? Or Commissioner Thomas, were you proposing that staff?
No, I think
come back
staff
with a
should just
recommendation?
tell us what they should be based on their use. I don't know what's on that one property that everybody knows is commercial, but we don't know what it is. So if staff can come back with, that'd be great.
Make it conforming. We can do that.
Mr. Githens, did you have a comment?
I was going to ask about this other commercial structure, whether you all think it should remain a commercial structure, or if you think it should be reverted to residential.
I don't know what it is, and I don't know what they're doing, so I'd like staff to make a recommendation.
I think I know what it is, and it's been there a long time. It's concrete production, like they make sewer, septic system covers and things like that.
I know this place previously was a pesticide treatment general contractor, and then they were renting it out to a company that had some retail sales. That has since moved on, and now they really would like to keep it as a partial rental for like a general contractor.
Okay.
With
so,
there's a residence on the site too.
So we do the residence with the general contractor, whatever. Yeah.
Rural general contractor zone.
I
That'd be
like
great.
that rural general
Okay.
contractor, right?
That'd be great.
Yep, great. And then the other one, I don't remember, auto sales goes
That one's
GB or
gonna be a
LB.
little more complicated.
Okay, you can figure that out. Thank you.
Okay,
GB.
Jackie, I think we've made it through the list. Was there anything else to discuss today?
I don't have anything. I think that it is a good idea to potentially, after staff has compiled all of our notes, we're going to have a lot of items that are for further research at a later date. I wouldn't mind help with that prioritization of what needs to be addressed in what order.
Great. Can we do that on Thursday at our,
We could, or we can do it even after the CDO if it's
Okay.
been requested to do it later.
After the CDO?
I think after the CDO is,
Yes. Is there anything else? Is there anything else that the Plan Commission would like to re-review together with these last minutes? Anything in the ordinance, anything in the maps?
So I will note for the record that I sent in 15 pages of revisions to the definitions, and a lot of it was deleting things that aren't necessary. Nothing was really substantive in that. It was all language and clarity and why is this here? Why are we talking about this? I will note for the record that I'm going to look at that sewer map that you sent me. Thank you. There are a couple areas west of the city that I think are zoned too dense, and so I'm going to look at that sewer map, and I don't know if I should make a proposal on Thursday or if we should just wait. But anyway, those 2 areas, there are 2 areas I think are already built up, have significant water issues, and don't have sewer. So I'd like to have those two sections. I'd like to make a proposal for those two sections. I'm not asking staff to do anything at this point. I got the map that I asked for, so that's what I needed. So,
Yeah, I'd just like to thank staff for a job well
oh
done.
my gosh, thank you.
And,
Ernie
yeah.
Katz.
Very good.
Okay, I'll echo that, and thank you to all the Plan Commission members and commissioners who have spent many days in this room talking through this. So do we have a motion for adjournment?
So moved.
So moved.
Thank you,
you.
Jeff. Thank you for getting us through.
Yeah.